If you ask people why they're drinking less, they want to be healthier. More and more people, like as we're getting older, I just turned 40. All my friends are the same age, more or less. Like drinking hurts. So I think people are just tired of the negative effects of alcohol. And most of the folks, you were talking about this earlier, like 94% of the people that are drinking, buying these products, drink alcohol. Mm-hmm. So they're just wanting to drink less. They want to be healthier. I think the craziest stat of all of them that I could throw at you is 64% of legal drinking age Gen Z basically does not drink alcohol at all. Teetotalers.
Wow.
An entrepreneur straight out of New York City, Michael Chernow was cracking.
What up, y'all? Welcome back to the Kreatures of Habit podcast. I am super excited about the guest today that I have on the show. His name is Sean Goldsmith. He is the co-founder and CEO of Zero Proof, which is the leading non-alcoholic beverage online store. Now, we have all, I'm sure, witnessed what's been going on in this NA beverage phenomenon, right? Like people, like every restaurant you go to in New York, maybe it's isolated to New York, California, Chicago, Austin, and South Florida. Who knows? But or Nashville. But a lot of restaurants are creating these non-alcoholic mocktail menus, and more people are talking about whether it's sobriety or just sober curious or just, hey, I don't want to drink as much. There is something really, really happening with non-alcoholic beverages. I sober a long time. It's music to my ears. I am so excited about this movement towards non-alcoholic beverages, where you're in an environment where a cocktail would make sense, or a beer would make sense, or a glass of wine would make sense, but guys like me, people like me are not partaking in that. And so for a long time, it was a Pellegrino or a club soda with a splash of cranberry juice and a lime. And now I really don't have to do that. Like, I can have a really delicious, awesome, cool cocktail, super funky stuff that is made with passion and thought and intention. Like literally, like cocktail mavens are putting energy into non-alcoholic beverages. It's spectacular, and Sean is sort of at the forefront of introducing these spirits to the masses. And before that, he was a financial data analyst. So I'm like really curious to know like how it went from data analysis in the financial world to Zero Proof, because that's an interesting transition. But I'm super excited to have you on the show, man. Thank you so much for making it out.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Right before we hit play on the recorder there, on the recorder. God, I sound like I'm from like 1943.
Playing flute.
But we were talking about the world of restaurants,
yeah.
And how you grew up in the restaurant biz, and you were telling me about your dad who created some really funky taco sushi spots that it's like when you said that, for a restaurant guy like me, I'm like, it's like it's like when you see like barbecue, sushi, Chinese food, and you're like, oh man, like cannot be great. But those are the restaurants
gonna crush.
They're gonna crush. They're gonna crush. And so, sure enough, your dad did that. It crushed. He sold it, and now you said that he had opened up his potentially, or maybe not, but like final hoorah at 70 years old.
Potentially, yeah. And so taco, T-A-K-O, is octopus in Japanese.
Right.
And he opened an Italian restaurant called Trattoria Polipo, which is octopus in Italian. So
is he an octopus fan?
Apparently. So yeah, he's got his maybe last restaurant now, but also doing well.
Where are these restaurants?
So I'm from Augusta, Georgia,
okay.
And so Polipo's in Augusta. The first taco was in Augusta, but then he opened them around Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina.
Very cool.
Yeah.
The world of restaurant is a world that I know really, really well. I grew up in New York City. I got my first job in a restaurant when I was 12. I worked every position one could work in a restaurant until I was 28 when I decided to bang my head against the wall as hard as I could and open up my first restaurant and then continue just banging my head against the wall.
Yeah,
and
it doesn't stop.
It doesn't stop. I opened up 14 restaurants over, from 2010 to 2019. And now I've taken a step back from the restaurant business, which has been a really awesome thing to do. But I would imagine that Zero Proof potentially was inspired by your childhood being around the restaurant industry. And I could be wrong. You never said that, but I would.
Yeah, I mean, the story of Zero Proof is a very organic kind of serendipitous story. But definitely growing up in that industry, like I love food, I love wine, I suppose I still love alcohol, I just don't drink it anymore. So being able to come back to this in a professional way is very cool, and I'm happy to be here, and I feel very at home. Growing up in restaurants, like when you're around it your whole life, you feel at home when you're out eating and just kind of out and about. So now that I get to go and call on these places, it's cool. It's easy. Going back to how you opened up, going from finance to starting a non-alcoholic blog, which has now turned into a big website. I had a career in finance. I was living here, had one job for 10 years and worked from the bottom. I started as a research assistant right out of college. And when I left, I was more or less running the company. And we scaled the company, like it got pretty big. But when I got to the top and kind of took a minute to pause and reflect and be like, all right, what am I doing? What do I want to be doing? Like I realized every day I was just not really doing what I wanted to be doing anymore. And so I did that for a year and I quit.
I just want to stop you there for a second. So you quit. So can you beam back into that moment where you were like, you kind of took note of it a year before you quit. You tortured yourself for another year potentially because you now knew that like you were living in a non-intentional kind of like work life.
Correct.
What was the moment that you were like, I'm done? I
don't remember the exact moment, but I do remember like it was really, really painful. Just when you're doing something that doesn't feel right and inside it's not right and you're kind of slogging through it, like it just gets to be, at least for me, it was impossible. And I remember having lots of conversations with colleagues, trusted colleagues, friends, family. And, I think just based on those conversations and the feedback that I got, and I remember people telling me like, man, we've known you a long time and you have changed. Like you're not a happy person. So I think kind of like hearing that was a big eye opener for me. And it was tough because, this was my one career. The founder of the company I was very, very close with. I was kind of his right-hand guy and he had become a close personal friend. So I remember I took him to lunch. It's like breaking up with a girlfriend or, where you come in and it's just a lot of anticipation. We went to lunch and kind of broke the news and then left.
What was his response?
Shock.
So he had no clue that you were kind of just like, you were kind of keeping this in a bit of a bucket.
Yeah. He was very surprised, and it was tough. It was stressful for me. It was stressful for him, and stressful for me. I had no plan. I was leaving a pretty big job, and just was going to figure it out. And he had a big hole to fill, but left really immediately. It was tough for a while, our friendship, but I actually talked to him today. We're totally cool, and we're back being buds, and he's still doing just fine.
I'm happy you say that. I had a really tough relationship with a business partner, my first business partner in Meatball Shop. Grew up best friends, opened up the business to like a ton of success. And as things started to unfold and become more successful and get more pressure and more stress, and our relationship suffered. And I got to a point similar to you where I knew that based on our inability to sort of align on a number of different things, him being sort of more of a left brain, I'd be more of a right brain kind of guy, I knew that I knew he wasn't going to go anywhere. It would be a fight to death. And I just said, you know what, I have to I have to make the decision here to step back. And I did. And I just remember how painful and hard that was, because like you, it was a great job. Like it was me co-founding a business, I mean, at the time that I decided to step back, it was tough, man. I was like, man, this thing could be.
I mean, it was an entity.
It was an entity.
Yeah.
It was an entity. And so that was a really hard decision. And I'm grateful to say now that like Daniel and I are best friends. Took 4 years. We needed some time, right?
Yeah.
But we're best friends again.
That's awesome.
And I was just at his, I was just staying with him and his brother in Los Angeles. Like, we're truly best friends again. So I'm happy you said that, because I also want to make a mention that, like, time does heal, right? If you want it to.
It does.
Time does heal, and it's important, even in relationships that could potentially be borderline unrepairable, that like Daniel's and I was. I'm here to say that like time heals, and change can happen in many ways.
That's great.
So let's get back to it.
So I'm unemployed, living in Manhattan, and I did some consulting work, but I mean, honestly, I was just like taking some time off and just kind of like shedding my skin, which, by the way, being unemployed and having a little money in the bank and living in Manhattan and being able to like meet your friends for lunch, and like I went surfing like 4 days a week in Rockaway. It was amazing. It was like living in a fantasy land. So I was just kind of being healthy, doing a lot of exercise, doing a lot of meditation, all the surfing and meditating and eating well, like, the textbook, what you do when you're soul searching. During that time, it was like Christmas time, holiday time around New York. And I just literally woke up one morning and I was like, man, I don't feel like drinking today. And I would drink every day, drink something more or less every day. Day 2, like, well, still don't want to drink. And like very quickly, like a week in, 2 weeks in, I felt amazing. Like just I was clear and I was sleeping well and like I was pretty fit, but like losing weight that I didn't even know that I had, like in my jowls, and like looking better and dealing with stress better. And so I was like, man, this is great. I'm just going to kind of lean into it. And, talking about best friends, shortly after I quit drinking, my best friend from high school, he did Whole30 with his wife, which is super restrictive diet, like no nothing, including alcohol. We were just talking, and he was like, man, I feel amazing. I was like, me too. And so, I mean, that was how the business started, was just the two of us having discussions about why we're not drinking. And like the category is relatively big now. It's at least well known, and there's a language around it. Whereas when we were doing it, it was still very much like you're sober or you're a drinker.
Right.
So we were kind of like trying to hash out, what are we? And we had some time. I wasn't working. He was selling his business. So we just popped up a blog. And man, I mean, like looking back, it was janky, as I guess most of them are. But we just wanted to learn more about this category that we discovered, about these premium non-alcoholic drinks that were new and exciting. And going back to the restaurant background, like it's like, oh, I still want to go out. I still want to live life, but I want to have great drinks. And so we started writing articles, started writing reviews. I would get like cicerones and master somms to weigh in, and just putting a little bit more effort in. And people from all over the world sent us product. This non-alc movement is much further along in Europe. Like if you're in the UK, or like I just got back from France, like it's everywhere.
Yeah.
In all the retail stores, all the menus. We're getting there here, but we got a ways to go.
I just want to make a mention to that real quick. It's so interesting that you say that. When I was in Spain, this is probably 14 years ago, and my wife and I flew to Madrid, and we drove all the way from Madrid, all like south, north. I mean, we were all over Spain for about a month.
Sounds like a great trip.
Oh, it was a great trip. This is pre-children. And every single, I don't want to say every village, but every town that we were in had like their own non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah, that's cool.
It was so good for me, especially because I don't drink. And some people in the sober community will say, oh, non-alcoholic beer is for non-alcoholic.
Yeah.
Which is fine for them. By all means, like that's if that's what you need, by all means, go for it. If you drinking a non-alcoholic beer or non-alcoholic spirit is going to make you want to drink a beer or a spirit,
Probably not the best idea.
Don't do it, right? But for a guy like me, I've got no problem drinking non-alcoholic beer. I actually really love it. I love the taste of beer. I love and I certainly don't like what beer does to me when it's got alcohol in it. So like the fact that I can have beer now that doesn't have alcohol in it is amazing, because beer and food for me is an amazing pair.
For sure.
So when we were going around Spain, and it was so cool because it wasn't here. Like there was like I think O'Doul's.
I mean, that long ago, you had O'Doul's and free wine.
Yeah, free
St.
wine.
Pauli Girl, probably.
Yeah, St. Pauli Girl, right. And I didn't really partake in non-alcoholic beer at that point because it just like wasn't like something that it wasn't around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so it was just so cool to see that. And that was a while ago. And so I would imagine that they're probably way ahead of the game.
They're way ahead of the game, and they all wanted to come to the U.S., but nobody would bring them over. So we started importing, and like I remember, I cold called the TTB, the regulatory agency for alcohol, and had to like talk to somebody there. I'm like, hey, who's regulating this stuff? He's like, man, I don't know. And like we kind of hashed it out together. So figured out the regulatory framework, started bringing this product in, popped up an e-com shop. We started wholesaling because, it's not alcohol, so you can sell direct out of the back of your car. And I literally did. Like I bought a pickup truck and drove it all around Georgia.
You can just pull up the stores and just sell it, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's like a juice.
And we did. And, would also like pack it up and UPS it after work. That's how it got started. And then from there, kind of fast forward to today, we've got the largest website, thezeroproof.com, where we sell 400 something different non-alcoholic SKUs, wine, spirits, cocktails, everything but beer. And we have a portfolio of imported and also owned brands that we're building out traditional distribution for around the U.S. And we are working with alcohol distributors.
To help distribute that stuff to restaurants and stuff.
Yeah,
that
only way to get around.
Right. That is so cool, man. That is so cool. Why no beer?
Only because we live in Georgia. Our business is based in Atlanta, Georgia.
Hot.
And, Atlanta or Georgia treats non-alcoholic beer like alcohol.
Really?
There are like 8 states. So, you can't ship it outside of the state. You can't sell it direct.
Got it.
So, you need all the licenses. So we have plans, but kind of as soon as we started, it just took off and didn't really have time to pause and worry about it.
There's a number of different categories, right? There's obviously spirits.
Yep.
There's wine. There's beer. Like out of those 3, where do you think what is like the most? What is celebrated the most currently right now?
Beer for sure.
Really?
Beer's the biggest.
Okay.
If you look at the breakdown of the non-alcoholic beverage market, beer's probably 80% of it.
Wow.
In terms of sales volume. Wine, 15 to 18, spirits, canned cocktails, the rest. So
not very much spirits and canned cocktails.
Not very much. Growing the fastest. Like sales volumes on spirits are growing like triple digits every year.
So let's just break this down for a second. So the spirit stuff, when you have it in its sort of raw form, does it taste like the actual spirit, or is it similar notes?
Similar notes. So it's let's say the first non-alcoholic spirits that came out, when you mixed them, the feedback was, I don't really taste anything. And so kind of the next wave of non-alcoholic spirits, people were really leaning into strong flavor characteristics. And the stronger flavor characteristics that are in a spirit, kind of the easier it is to make a non-alcoholic version of. That's why you see like a lot of aperitivos, because it's strong on bitter, strong on citrus. Whereas bourbon, something that's super subtle and like gets all this flavor from decades in a barrel, is a little bit tougher. But in general, the neat liquid, like if you just take a shot, not that shots taste great anyway, but not going to be very great. But like on a tequila, they're really dialing up the wood notes. They're really dialing up the burn, the spice. So when you make a margarita, you're getting it's shining through. So for the most part, they're meant to be mixed.
And what about wine?
What about it?
Yeah. Like, are there non-alcoholic wines that you can put next to an alcoholic wine and have a similar experience sans the alcohol?
Wine is like the next frontier. There are a lot of great brands out there. There's a lot of interest, and as more money and more technology comes in, it's just going to get better. Sparkling is further along than still wines because alcohol is super volatile.
Yeah.
Like when you take a sip of alcohol, it kind of just explodes flavor in your mouth as it evaporates, and bubbles kind of do that same thing, act as a flavor carrier. So if you were to do a side by side, I think on a sparkling, you're going to fool more people.
Got it.
But there are some great reds, there are some great whites.
Are there certain varietals that actually perform better non-alcoholically than others?
I think kind of the same basic principle with spirits, like strong flavor characteristics. We are working with a really high-end, well-known grower of Cabernet in Napa in the wine region, and sourcing like single vineyard fruit and doing like really, really fantastic single vineyard Cab Sauv under the St. Viviana label.
So like a big, bold,
minus the alcohol.
right?
But we did a formulation day where we brought in master somms and winemakers and like locked ourselves in a room for like 8 hours. And it's just winemaking. And let me back up. With non-alc wine, you take finished wine and then you remove the alcohol. And you do that using vacuum distillation, which is basically in a vacuum, you heat it up just above room temperature is hot enough to burn off the ethanol. And then you do an additional winemaking process to rebalance everything. So it's a super involved and super expensive process. But, locked ourselves in this room, had a bunch of guys that know way more about wine than I do. I was like, we cannot leave until we have something that everybody loves. And like, these guys were brutal. And we got something that is out of this world.
And so this is a wine that you guys are collaborating on.
Yeah. I mean, it's ours. We made it.
Wow, that is so cool. I got to try. Is it in the market now?
So V1 is in the market. V2 is coming.
Okay.
So we'll have it in a couple months. But yeah, I'll definitely get you that. And then, so we do the California Cab and then a Washington State Sauv Blanc.
It's interesting. Like I do have a fair amount of non-alcoholic spirits at home. Like the truth is when I partake in sort of like a mocktail, it tends to be at an event or at a restaurant. I don't spend the time to make cocktails at home, although it just sounds like something that could be just like a fun thing to do. What do you think is inspiring this movement? Like, what do you think is really at the crux of why this has literally? I mean, it's not a flash in the pan. It's been slowly building, and it's
slowly building, and I think like we're hitting a major tipping point. The easiest way to explain it is just wellness. Like people, if you ask people why they're drinking less, they want to be healthier. More and more people, like as we're getting older, I just turned 40. All my friends are the same age, more or less. Like drinking hurts. So I think people are just tired of the negative effects of alcohol. And most of the folks, you were talking about this earlier, like 94% of the people that are buying these products, drink alcohol. So they're just wanting to drink less. They want to be healthier. I think the craziest stat of all of them that I could throw at you is 64% of legal drinking age Gen Z basically does not drink alcohol at all. Teetotalers.
Wow.
So you just have this tidal wave, this generational tidal wave coming that it's going to change the game. And we deal with big alcohol companies, we deal with big alcohol distributors, and sometimes they kind of get dragged into this category kicking and screaming. But something that I've heard time and time again when we're sitting down with some of the executives is, I don't get it, I don't necessarily like it, but I have kids and none of them drink. Like their friends do not drink.
Obviously I'm biased, but I think that is incredible. I love hearing that.
It's wild.
It's wild. I mean, I can only hope that it happens in other arenas as well, right? Like it would be amazing if the Gen Zs were like, and by the way, we also don't use social media anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think social media is also one of the things that's driving drinking less, just because
I'm sure
you're always on. You can't slip up.
Yeah.
But yeah, social media, that's also a tough habit to kick.
Yeah, that is great news though. I mean, I would imagine with less drinking, it's going to make, waves in every way possible, in a positive way, right? Like more motivation, less death, less crime, less sexual whatever, like all sorts of ways, right?
For sure.
There's like alcohol is really a catalyst to like lots of, unsavory activity.
Yeah, for sure. Like we're all for alcohol. Like again, 94% of the folks drink booze, but there's not a lot of positive that comes from it. You can have a good time.
Well, I mean, I've had some of the best times in my life. There's no doubt about it. On alcohol, and I everybody I know outside of the people in my sober world drink alcohol. My wife definitely loves alcohol.
Same.
She drinks for both of us. But, you know, I do think that a movement towards drinking less is just incredible, right? I think it's incredible because a little earlier on a podcast, we were talking about exposure to things that man makes. And in the last 7,500 years, you know, there's been a lot of things that are new to the environment, new to the atmosphere, new to food, new to water, new to everything that we just don't have any control over. That's killing us, right? That's just killing us, right? And there's no doubt about it. Like alcohol consumption at scale is like terrible for your health. I mean,
Yes.
It just is. It's terrible for your health.
What's happening with alcohol is very reminiscent of what happened with cigarettes, where, you know, I'm on a bunch of industry newsletters, and it seems like at least every week, if not every day, there's some new study coming out about, you know, how bad alcohol is. I read one the other day that was, I'm of course going to mess up the stats, but like every drink you take knocks off 5 minutes of your life. So, you know, like drinking over time.
I'm dead. I'm dead.
you beat the odds.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, drinking over time can knock years off of your life. And so, you know, just speaking from personal experience, you feel amazing. I mean, you're so much more productive. You're so much more driven. You can get so much more done. And, you know, when you go out for a night of drinking, as you probably remember, you're gone for a couple days, making bad decisions, eating greasy burgers. And like, you know, I still like some ice cream and stuff like that. But for the most part, keep it in check.
Yeah. Do you get people that write in and thank you guys for making this stuff available?
We do. We get some really glowing love letters. And also, when we're out, like we sponsored this music festival, Outside Lands, out in San Francisco, and we set up and served some drinks. And when you're out at something like that, where people are not expecting to find these cool options that are non-alcoholic, I mean, you get pregnant women that are stoked, and like we have people that are like, I haven't had a drink in 30 years. Like, this is amazing. It's like, cool. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, it's all kinds, but generally a positive reception, except for one guy who was a little stoned out of his gourd, who thought that he was buying alcohol and came back and yelled at us.
Gotta love that guy. Gotta love that guy. All right, so let's just quickly, for the listener who potentially is like, oh, this is interesting. You know, maybe I haven't really been paying attention or haven't heard about the non-alcoholic sort of, you know, movement or what's happening. If they wanted to go over to the Zero Proof and like choose something to try, what would you say? Hey, like, this isn't going to get you drunk, so let's start there, right? It
will not get you drunk.
Right. This is not something that's going to have alcohol in it, so just like set your expectations at that level. But for someone who wanted to try, what would you suggest for like first timer?
I think a good place to start is just with a sparkling non-alcoholic wine. Like you could try Oddbird Blanc de Blanc is a great one that we sell a lot of. It's a French sparkling wine. Another favorite is from the brand Ish. They do a rosé from Germany. That's incredible. For still wines, I love the St. Viviana Cabernet and Sauvignon Blanc.
We're going to hit all these in the show notes, by the way.
And then, yeah, we've been having a lot of success with Lapo's Negroni.
You gave me that. I love that. That is so good.
Yeah.
Glad
you like it.
I love it, and I also love the branding. I feel like you nailed it with that.
Thanks. Yeah, we worked with a designer in Austin who, like, I found on Instagram, and you know, we knocked that brand out in like 2 turns.
Wow.
You know, I had a vision, and did I tell you the story of Lapo's?
No.
So back in my old finance days, during the summer, we would sometimes host clients in Italy, and I would pop over to Florence just solo because I had been there many times and like it. And I would go to Harry's bar. I would order Negronis, sit outside, smoke a cigar, drink a Negroni, and did that for several years and got to be buds with this young guy named Lapo, who he was the head bartender there, and he came to New York when I was living in New York, and I gave him all my favorite places to go. And so we've been buds for like 15 years.
Wow.
And so just always loved that experience, loved Lapo, and it was just a fun way to kind of bring some real life into this brand. And so,
I mean, that story is epic. So congratulations for that, and being thoughtful there, and sort of that I can, I feel like branding is something that I love. I love the art and the creativity and the journey of, and the sometimes pain of branding, right? Authenticity. Like that story is, do you have that story written anywhere on the bottle?
in a very condensed fashion.
You do? Okay.
Very condensed fashion.
I for me, when I hear stories like that and I see just sort of like the ramification of that story in a visual expression, I believe that those are the brands that win.
I will say it makes it a lot easier if you're coming from an authentic place.
Totally, and have that story.
To build things out.
People love storytelling.
People love storytelling.
People love hearing stories since the beginning of time.
Well, I mean, you've been sold wine before. It's like everybody comes in, it's like, well, this guy sings classical music to his grapes under the full moon. Like, oh man, well that makes for good wine.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I love that there's a great story like that behind Lapos. I've been sipping on that stuff. I think it's
awesome.
fantastic.
Well, we'll get you some more.
Yeah, so I was gonna actually suggest that as like for somebody that just wants to start. I mean, you pour that stuff over ice and you put a little lemon wheel out or orange.
Drink it out of the
wheel.
can. Put it on ice with some orange. Yeah, I mean it's the canned cocktails are a good easy way to start. Like to your point, people don't necessarily want to mix a cocktail at home, so with these, pop the top, good to go.
Dude, I am so excited for what's happening here, and it's really cool to be sitting with a guy who truly is part of this movement. And making it available for people that either are sober or just want to drink less or want to try something new.
Yeah.
Want to try something new.
People are excited about it and interested in it.
Now that you're here, do you is there anything, do you have plans for building more brands in that space or potentially, joining your father on the brutal path of brick and mortar?
No. Well, no to the second. I will say, Dad is a good customer. So thanks, Dad. My brother too, who also has a restaurant. So building out the brands, like we have more products in development, both for St. Viviana and Lapos. And we work with brands that we import, Ish, Oddbird, Nista. So we have a pretty good portfolio. And really from here, like it's growing with the category. Like we're just at the beginning. Retail stores are just starting to really build out shelf space for the category. Restaurants are, you and I notice it because we're looking for it, but it's still so early. And there's a long way to run on restaurants. So just making sure that we're getting full national distribution, getting all the retail shelves, and continuing to spread the word and make sure that we're pulling product from shelves.
Are you seeing this happening in literally across the country, or is it more in the tier 1 sort of markets?
New York is a big market, California, big market.
Mm-hmm.
But Minnesota crushes.
Oh, really?
Crushes.
Wow, that is so cool.
Yeah.
Like Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Crushes.
Wow.
And not just for us, talking to all my friends that are in the business, yeah, something's going on in Minneapolis.
Wow. I wonder what that is.
It really is a national phenomenon. We have a lot of success in Atlanta where we're based, and it's catching on. People across the country are just wanting to be healthier. And
when you made this life decision and you were like, man, I'm done with the suit. I'm gonna do something that I'm passionate about, and it sort of organically aligned for you. You moved out of New York and down to Atlanta.
Yeah.
Was that just to get closer to the fam?
No, it was total coincidence. My wife is a doctor. She was up here at NYU training, and of all places, her first job was in Augusta, Georgia.
That is not a coincidence, man. That is something else was going on there.
Yeah, no, it was pretty wild. And she's a New Yorker. So we moved to Augusta just before COVID, which ended up being perfect for us. My family was there. It's inexpensive. We know a lot of people, and I was starting this business. So just kind of head down, cranked for a couple of years, and then once COVID lifted, we were ready for a little more action. So we
moved to Atlanta.
Yeah.
I've got one last question about this stuff because I'm just so interested in it. Have you seen brands start to include sort of functional ingredients and, nootropics and things like that into the beverages?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there are brands like Kin and Hyo that we sell on our website that are using ashwagandha and whatever else.
I've been
there
a
is.
Hyo guy for years.
Yeah.
I met those guys like the day they launched.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they were in Venice, and a buddy of mine was helping them sort of strategize, and I met with them at Erewhon of all places, of course, in Venice.
Naturally.
Yeah. and like they had just launched it. And
They're crushing.
Are they?
They are crushing.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so good to hear.
Yeah, they're doing super well.
That's so good to hear. It's a great product. They send me a couple cases every month.
Nice.
My whole family loves it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, people are really digging the functional drinks, and like something that's kind of happening now that is a little newer is this Delta 9.
What is that? Is that like the cannabis?
It's THC derived from hemp. As of now, it's mostly legal. Like you can go to a grocery store and buy it off the shelves. So like people have been really digging that. We don't currently sell it, but so yeah, I mean, people definitely still want some feeling from their drinks from time to time.
Totally. Dude, this is awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
I'm like, I'm inspired. I'm intrigued. I'm very, very curious about this world. And I think, and again, I want to put a disclaimer on this. Like, if you are in the sober world and this is going to drive you to want to drink alcohol or use drugs, do yourself a favor and don't even don't
Correct.
go there.
Not worth the risk.
Not worth the risk. However, it's a very, very exciting. It's very, very exciting for me, for someone who has not drank for such a long time, to know that there are finally people coming around to this idea that like life is pretty damn good without a ton of booze all the time.
And you can still get a tasty beverage and hang out with your friends. Like it's all good.
Totally. So where can people follow along with your journey?
TheZeroProof.com would be the best place.
Awesome. Guys, that was so much fun to learn about this non-alcoholic movement. I don't want to say resurgence because it's really not a resurgence. It's brand new. I mean, I guess the only thing that we can compare this to maybe like things that were popping up in the Prohibition. I don't know. Things are really happening in the world of non-alcoholic beverage, and Sean is really at the forefront and kind of like a pioneer to bringing it to the masses in this country. So I'm super excited to be able to have a conversation with him and chat with him. And you should go check out Zero Proof for sure. The Zero Proof. Even if you just want to give, take a weekend and say, hey, I'm not going to have the martini. I'm going to try something different. Give it a shot. Check them out. See what they've got to offer. I'm sure you're going to find something awesome there. I know I certainly have. If you liked this episode of the podcast, do me a favor. Share it with a friend. Share it with a family member. Share the damn thing. Put it on your social media. Send it to a couple of people via text. Just copy the link and send it to a couple of friends. It would really, really mean the world. That's how we get this podcast out there to more people. Word of mouth means everything. Also, if you want to give us a 5-star rating and a great review, I would love you for a long time. Don't give us anything less than a 5-star rating or a bad review. You can DM me and tell me how bad I suck. Don't do it online. And other than that, man, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so, so much for tuning in to another episode of the Kreatures Have a Podcast. Until the next one, y'all. Peace.